The flight attendant leaned close to my seat, her name tag reading Jessa Reed. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed a napkin on my tray table. "Ma'am, I need you to pretend you're feeling ill," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the cabin noise. "Get off this plane right now. Please." I stared at her confused. We were about to take off for Seattle, where my daughter Brianni was waiting to celebrate my 63rd birthday. I'd been planning this trip for months, my first vacation since my husband Edmund died 2 years ago. "Excuse me," I said. Jessa's eyes darted toward the front of the plane. Then back to me, pure fear filled her expression, not nervousness, terror. "I can't explain," Jessa whispered urgently. "But you're in danger, trust me." She straightened up, speaking louder for other passengers to hear. "Are you feeling all right, ma'am? You look pale." I didn't feel pale. I felt perfectly fine, if a bit annoyed by this strange interaction. Other passengers were watching now, curious about the commotion. An older man across the aisle frowned with concern. A young mother, too, rose up, turned to look. "I'm fine," I said firmly. Jessa's face fell. She leaned down again, her voice desperate. "Please, Mrs. Wilmington, I saw your name on the manifest. You have to listen to me." How did she know my name? Flight attendants don't memorize passenger names before takeoff. Something in her desperation made me pause. I'd spent 40 years as an emergency room nurse before retiring. I knew what real fear looked like, and this woman was genuinely terrified. But terrified of what? Why? I asked quietly, "What's happening?" Jessa glanced toward the cockpit, then to a man in business class wearing a gray suit. He was watching us intently, his hand resting inside his jacket. "I can't say here," Jessa breathed, "but if you stay on this flight, something terrible will happen. Please." The engines powered up. We were minutes from taxiing. I thought about Brianni, waiting at the airport with balloons and a cake. I thought about the non-refundable ticket. Then I thought about Edmund, who always told me to trust my instincts. "I'm not getting off without knowing why," I said firmly. Jessa's eyes filled with tears. She straightened again, speaking in her professional voice. "I'll get you some water." She walked away quickly, stopping to speak urgently with another flight attendant near the galley. They both looked at me, then at the man in the gray suit. The second attendant's face went white. Something was very wrong here. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Flight attendants, prepare for departure." Jessa rushed back to my row, but this time she pressed something into my hand. A folded piece of paper. "Read this in the bathroom," she whispered, "then decide." She moved away before I could respond, taking her jump seat for takeoff. My heart pounded as I unfolded the paper in my lap, hiding it from other passengers. The handwriting was rushed, almost illegible. "The man in 3B is Kellerman Voss. Federal fugitive, weapons trafficking. He's escaping to Canada via Seattle connection. 2 accomplices on board. They know a federal witness is on this flight in economy. They plan to cause a disturbance at cruising altitude to identify and eliminate the witness. You match the witness description. You're not the target, but they think you are. Get off now." My hands shook. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to retired nurses from Portland. But Jessa's terror had been genuine. And that man in 3B was definitely watching me. The plane began moving, taxiing toward the runway. My window showed the terminal getting smaller. If I was going to act, it had to be now. But what if this was a mistake? What if Jessa was confused or mentally unstable? I'd look like a fool, cause a scene, miss my daughter's celebration. Then I looked at the man in 3B again. He was still staring, and now he was talking quietly into his phone despite the announcement to turn off devices. His eyes never left me. That wasn't normal passenger behavior. I pressed the call button. Jessa appeared within seconds, hope flashing across her face. "Yes, ma'am, I'm feeling dizzy," I said loudly, very dizzy and nauseous. It wasn't hard to fake the tremor in my voice. Jessa's relief was visible. "Let me get the captain informed immediately." She rushed to the cockpit, knocked urgently. Within a minute, the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a minor medical situation. We're returning to the gate." Groans filled the cabin. The businessman in 3B stood abruptly, his face dark with anger. "This is ridiculous." He shouted, "We're already moving." A flight attendant quickly approached him. "Sir, please sit down. We'll be moving again shortly." But the man, Kellerman Voss, if that was really his name, didn't sit. He looked directly at me, with such hatred that my blood went cold. Somehow he knew I'd caused this delay, and he was furious. Two other men stood up from different sections of the plane. One was 3 rows behind me, tall with a shaved head. The other was in the exit row, wearing a baseball cap pulled low. They didn't look at each other, but their movements were coordinated. All 3 were now standing, ignoring the flight attendant's instructions to sit. "Sir, federal regulations require you to be seated during taxi," Jessa said firmly to Voss. He smiled, and it was the coldest expression I'd ever seen. "I need to use the lavatory. That's not illegal." "Is it?" He moved toward the back of the plane, and his path took him directly past my seat. As he passed, he leaned down and whispered, "Stupid mistake." The plane stopped moving. We were still far from the gate. The captain announced we'd need a few minutes to coordinate the return. Voss stood near the bathroom, blocking the aisle. The other 2 men had positioned themselves strategically, one near the emergency exit, one near the cockpit. They weren't just passengers, they were controlling the space. I realized with growing horror that getting off the plane might not be as simple as I'd thought. Jessa approached me with a wheelchair. "Ma'am, we'll get you off as soon as we reach the gate." Her eyes held a warning. She knew the situation was deteriorating. The man with the shaved head suddenly spoke up. "Why are we stopping for one person? Just let her off here if she's so sick." "That's not possible, sir," another flight attendant replied. "We must return to the gate for any passenger departure. This is a waste of everyone's time." The man in the baseball cap added, "She doesn't even look sick." They were creating pressure, trying to force the crew to either take off with me aboard or do something irregular. I understood the tactic. Anything irregular gave them an opportunity. The plane finally reached the gate. The seatbelt sign turned off. "Ma'am, please come with me," Jessa said, offering her hand. I stood on shaky legs, and it wasn't entirely an act anymore. I was genuinely frightened. As I moved toward the exit, Voss stepped into the aisle, blocking my path. "Feeling better already?" he asked, his voice dripping with mockery. "Sir, step aside," Jessa said firmly. For a moment, I thought he would refuse. His hand moved inside his jacket again, and I saw the outline of something solid. A weapon, but then a voice spoke from behind me. "Federal Air Marshal, step back." Now, a man I'd barely noticed, passenger in seat 7A. Unremarkable, middle-aged, now stood with his badge visible. Agent Cordell Finch. He'd been on the plane the entire time. Voss's expression changed from confidence to calculation. He stepped back slowly. The other 2 men sat down immediately. Trying to blend in, Agent Finch moved past me, positioning himself between me and Voss. "Ma'am, please exit the aircraft," he said calmly. Jessa guided me quickly toward the door. As I stepped onto the jetway, I heard shouting behind me. More agents boarded the plane, moving quickly past ground crew. This had been planned. They'd been waiting for the plane to return. Jessa walked with me all the way into the terminal. "You saved your own life," she said quietly. "They would have caused an incident during the flight. The real federal witness is actually in first class, but they had old information saying she'd be in economy. Your approximate age and appearance. You matched enough that they targeted you." My knees went weak. I sat down hard in a terminal chair. "How did you know?" I asked. Jessa pulled out her phone, showing me a photo. "I'm not just a flight attendant. I'm also Agent Reed, FBI." My mind reeled. The entire situation had been a setup, and I'd stumbled into the middle of it. "We've been tracking Voss for 6 months," Agent Reed explained. "We knew he'd try to flee today, and we knew he'd identified a protected witness on this flight. We couldn't cancel the flight without tipping him off, but we also couldn't let him act. When you boarded and sat in the exact seat our witness was originally assigned before we moved her, I realized he'd target you." She looked apologetic. "I had to get you off without being obvious about it. If Voss knew we were onto him, he might have acted immediately or fled the plane." "So you risked my life as bait?" I asked, anger rising. "No," Agent Reed said firmly. "We had Air Marshal Finch on board and 6 agents waiting to board the moment the plane returned. You were never truly in danger once we knew the situation. But I needed you to react naturally, to genuinely seem sick so Voss wouldn't suspect a setup." She touched my shoulder gently. "I'm sorry I frightened you, but your reaction was perfect. You helped us arrest 3 dangerous fugitives without anyone getting hurt." Through the terminal windows, I could see multiple police vehicles surrounding the plane. Passengers were being evacuated. News helicopters circled overhead. My quiet trip to see my daughter had turned into a federal operation. My phone rang, Briani. Mom, are you okay? The news is saying something happened on your flight. I explained everything to Briani, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my hands still shook. She was horrified, relieved, and angry all at once. You're not getting back on a plane today, she said firmly. I'm driving down to Portland right now. We'll celebrate your birthday here. After hanging up, Agent Reed sat with me while I gave my statement to federal investigators. They showed me photos, confirming identifications. Kellerman Voss was indeed a major weapons trafficker. The other two men were his security team. They'd been planning to force a situation where they could identify and eliminate the federal witness, who was set to testify against Voss's organization. The real witness, a woman named Patricia, was safe in first class the entire time under protection. Why didn't you just arrest them before the flight? I asked. Agent Reed sighed. We needed them on the plane to catch them in the act of attempting to harm a federal witness. That carries much heavier charges than just fleeing. Plus, we wanted to see if they'd reveal other members of their network. She showed me a tablet with surveillance footage. Look at this. The video showed Voss making phone calls in the terminal, sending text messages. He was coordinating with people on the ground. When the plane returned, those associates were arrested too. We got 7 people today because you helped us execute this operation. I didn't feel like a hero. I felt like someone who'd barely escaped something terrible without fully understanding the danger. The FBI offered to put me in a hotel, but Briani arrived within 2 hours and drove me home. The news was calling it the Jetway takedown, showing footage of Voss and his associates being led off in handcuffs. My face was visible in some shots. The sick passenger who triggered the return to gate. My phone exploded with messages from friends and former coworkers. The hospital where I'd worked for decades called to make sure I was okay. Even my distant cousin from Florida reached out. That night, unable to sleep, I thought about how close I'd come to being in the middle of violence at 30,000 feet. If I'd ignored Jessa's warning, if I'd been too stubborn or skeptical, things could have ended very differently. A week later, Agent Reed visited my home. She brought flowers and an official letter from the FBI thanking me for my cooperation. The real reason I'm here, she said, sitting in my living room, is to tell you what your quick thinking prevented. She pulled out a folder with documents. Voss had purchased a specialized device disguised as a laptop battery. At cruising altitude, he planned to trigger a small explosive disturbance near where he thought the witness was sitting, your area. Not enough to destroy the plane, but enough to create chaos and cover for eliminating his target. My mouth went dry. He would have killed innocent people. Yes, Agent Reed confirmed. Several. Probably, including you. Your decision to trust my warning and get off that plane saved lives beyond just your own. She explained that Voss was facing multiple life sentences. The evidence gathered from that day, including his coordinated planning and the device they found in his carry-on, was overwhelming. The real witness, Patricia, testified successfully, and dozens of people involved in illegal weapons trafficking were now facing justice. You were part of something much bigger than one flight, Agent Reed said. Your instincts were right when you almost stayed on board. Something did feel off. And your instincts were right when you decided to trust me. Both things were true before leaving. She gave me her card. If you ever need anything, call me. You're someone who listens to warnings, even when they don't make complete sense. That's rare and valuable. After she left, I sat alone, processing everything. Briani stayed with me for a week, making sure I was okay. We had a quiet birthday celebration. Just the two of us, eating cake and watching old movies. Are you going to fly again? She asked. I thought about it. The truth was, I'd been scared, but I'd also seen good people doing their jobs, protecting strangers, putting themselves at risk for others. Agent Reed, Air Marshal Finch, even the other flight attendants who'd stayed calm. Yes, I said finally, I'll fly again. Because most flights are safe. Most people are good, and most warnings, when they come from that deep place of genuine fear, should be listened to. 6 months later, I flew to Seattle without incident. I'm 63 years old, and I've learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust someone who's trying to help you, even when you don't understand why. We live in a world where we're taught to be skeptical, to question everything, to trust no one. And that's often smart, but sometimes, genuine warnings come from unexpected places. A flight attendant who breaks protocol. A stranger who sees danger you can't. A feeling in your gut that something isn't right. The key is learning to distinguish between paranoia and intuition, between manipulation and genuine concern. Trust isn't about being naive. It's about paying attention to context, reading people's true intentions, and having the courage to act even when you don't have complete information. That flight attendant saved my life by asking me to trust her for just 5 minutes. I'm alive today because I did. If someone in authority gives you a safety warning, take it seriously. Flight crews are trained to protect passengers. Air marshals work undercover to keep flights safe. Trust your instincts, but also trust professionals doing their jobs. For suspicious activity, contact TSA 1-866-289-9673. Before you go, I need to know something. What hit you the hardest? The betrayal. The moment everything fell apart. The twist you never saw coming. Drop it in the comments right now. And tell me what you want to see next. Medical fraud, family secrets, financial crimes, hidden identities. Your ideas become our next stories. If this story kept you glued to the screen, hit that like button. If you want more shocking true stories that expose the truth, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's coming next. Thanks for letting me share this story with you. The next one drops soon, and it's going to shake you even harder. See you there.